Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with the Better Events podcast. And in this week's episode, we have an amazing guest, Beline Lafayette, who is from the University of Florida Semiconductor Institute. And she's going to be talking all about what it's like to plan events at a university or a higher education institution, specifically conferences, but she talks about all different kinds of events and the lessons we can learn, both as folks interested in getting into the event world of higher education, but also as an independent planner or even a corporate planner. There are some nuggets in there for you. So without further ado, let's get into this episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. We are, as always, thrilled to be with you, but especially today because we're covering a really interesting topic that we haven't talked about. And so we're thrilled to introduce you to our guest. But before we do that, we are chatting about university-hosted conferences and events today. And this is something that Logan and we were talking before we started recording. And we've had some other people reach out about this topic as well. And so it feels very niche, but it also feels like very, very large when you actually think about how many events are hosted at universities. So we're so thrilled to get into our topic today. And to do that, we are going to have Logan introduce our guest.
Yes, I'm thrilled to introduce Beline Lafayette, is the event planner for the UF, University of Florida, for any of our West Coast listeners, UF Florida Semiconductor Institute, where she leads statewide initiatives connecting academia, industry, and community through strategic events and workforce programs. With over 7 years of experience and a background in marketing and event management in higher education, she brings a creative and purposeful approach to every experience she designs. I mean, Bailey, that is a lovely introduction. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you said everything nothing really to add. Before we get started, I did want to just do a brief disclaimer and let everyone know that the views and opinions expressed on this podcast are strictly my own and do not reflect those of my university. Any event planning insights or advice are based on my personal experience, and I encourage all of you to follow your own university and college guidelines.
Thank you so much for that. It's super important, and we will take that into consideration as we have our conversation today. And before we get into the heart of it, we like to have a moment about why we invited our guests. And so we're going to have a moment for you right now and talk about that. You are, correct us if we're wrong, a listener of the podcast, and we appreciate you so much for that. And you reached out to us about an idea that you had about university events, I think a couple ways. I think maybe on LinkedIn and then also through email. And you sent us like this wonderfully crafted idea for a episode. And we love the idea, honestly. And a lot of it is because, one, we don't know a lot about it. So what a better time to have a guest come and share their expertise. And then also, like we said a little bit earlier, you've had other people mention it before. And so this is such a cool part of the industry that we are so excited just to learn from you about today. And so thank you again for being here. All right, so let's get into our discussion. And we like to start, at the very beginning, at a kind of introductory stage. So can you just explain how you got involved in the event industry, what your journey has been, and then how you got into the world of university event planning?
So my degree is in tourism, events, recreation management with a specialization in hospitality management. So during one of my internships at a hotel, we actually did a sales visit to a campus department, dropping off little goodies, just like, hey, think of us next time you need to plan something local. And so I connected with one of the directors of one of the conference departments at the university. And it was my senior year of college. And so I was looking for a job and I saw they had an opening and I was like, oh, I don't know if she'll remember me. So I sent her a message and I applied and I got that job. And it was conference assistant, eventually promoted to conference coordinator. So that's how I got my foot in the door. I did that for about 4 years. And I loved it. It was awesome, amazing. I learned a lot, got to travel. And then from there, I went into sales and marketing for a little bit and then went back into the university and more of a sales and marketing, but still event planning role. And then now I've transitioned into strictly event planning for the Florida Semiconductor Institute.
Yeah, I know Mary touched on this. That's a very interesting background because I know my mom is somebody who works for University of Pennsylvania and works as well in different departments through higher education, and all of her stories have been fascinating. And I've known there's things I can always pull and apply to my events. So I love that you got your foot in the door, as an assistant, working into coordinator, and then kind of bouncing around. It sounds like you've been in a couple different departments at the University of Florida. So how has that shaped your perspective on planning events in the higher education space?
Definitely made me realize that there's a lot of complexities, not only on the university level, but per department, per college. At the first position that I've held as a conference coordinator, it was as a DSO, so a direct support organization that was part of the university, but not necessarily directly within the university. So there were some flexible things that we could do that normally those who fall directly under the university couldn't do. And then when I worked at the Career Center, there were stricter guidelines because it was a part of the Division of Student Life. And now within the Florida Semiconductor Institute, it's within a college. So not Division of Student Life, but within a college. So there's different rules, regulations, and processes that I would have to follow, being that it falls under a specific college, which is the College of Engineering.
That's so interesting. I'm just like taking a moment to wrap my brain around that because it's like layer upon layer upon layer. And it makes sense, but it's like so interesting. Do you know, this is kind of like a sidebar question. Do you happen to know if other universities kind of function in that similar type of format, or would you say that's specific to your situation?
From my understanding and what I've heard from other people, yes, it's called like a decentralized model. Like certain universities have, like each college would have their own conference planner, if you will. And then even more on a granular level, each department within that college might have like one event planner. And same for Division of Student Life, because they plan all types of events for students specifically, and then they might have a conference center to help all the other departments who can't afford a conference planner or event planner.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by your comment there that certain things were different, even just based on that structure you're talking about. Do you have like an event example of something that you've had to do differently from your last role and the current role you're in now?
So one thing I can think of from just event planning and registration. So depending on which department you're in or college you're in, you have the ability to work with different platforms. So when I worked at the Career Center, there was a specific platform that we used to take in all registration, all monies. Students would register, employers would register for career fairs and career related events. And then now in my current position, we're able to use a different type of platform because it's geared towards a different audience and take in money a different way.
That reminds me of this one corporate event that we're involved in. Well, actually, it's a nonprofit event, but they function like a corporation. They're really big, and with all the different departments that they do have like different planning teams for each department. So I'm trying to relate it to something that I've done before. And so if anyone's listening to this, and you might have maybe you're part of a large company and maybe it's structured semi-similar. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but that's what it's reminding me of. So yeah. Anyway, I was just thinking about that. But kind of, I guess, in that same vein, what would you say are like the biggest differences between those university hosted events? I think we can tell a lot of them by what you've already said, versus those in like the corporate or nonprofit sectors.
Just based on what I've experienced, for me, it's more so working with professors. Working with professors, they'd probably be the chair of the conference or for an example is of the conference. And so going into mine with them leading the content and you're there to help guide. So for example, I'm working on a summit and so the two conference chairs, they're telling me, like, okay, this is the type of content we would like to have. But I'm generating the agenda and saying, here's the different speaker slots that I think would make sense. Here's when we should have a break. I think we should have a panel. It opens the door for more discussion. Then maybe shorter talks, like speed talks and things like that. So I am creating that agenda layout for them, and they're filling in those speaker slots, whether it's through abstracts or invited speakers. I'm not sure if that's how corporate goes, but that's how I've experienced it on more so the university side, even in my current position, and also when I was a conference coordinator as well.
Yeah. How have you seen? Because that just sounds like, I mean, everybody in every event's got stakeholders, but it sounds like your stakeholders are often, like the summit example, are academics, which, if I can think back to my own personal university professors, they are their own cast of beings who are usually quite smart in a very specific topic. But that probably can lead to some blinders or challenges when it comes to what you're doing with event planning. Have you, like, how do you see that differ from working with like CEOs or executives, non-academic folks?
So right now I'm working on, like I said, a summit, and we have invited non-academic folks to help on the planning committee. And so just working with them, their budgets are bigger than ours. So the ideas that they throw in are like these grand ideas, and it's like, hey, we're on, university dollars, so we can't do all of that. So that's one thing that I've noticed. And then more so on like the glitz, the glamour, a lot of times when it comes to like conferences and summits, the attendees, they're there to network, but also for the content as well. Because something may sound boring to me while I'm listening there because it goes over my head. But at the same time, when I look in the audience and I see attendees are engaged, they're taking notes. And I'm just like, okay, I don't understand what's going on right now, but at least they seem engaged.
That's awesome. I feel like you're probably not alone in that thought process. We've all thought that at one point or another. So it's a great point. One of the things that you mentioned before we started recording was that there is kind of a specific contracting and procurement process. So my understanding is that university planners will face strict regulations in regards to this. So can you just paint a picture on what that actually looks like and how it differs from the other parts of the industry?
Yeah, so one thing that comes to mind as a university planner, you're not allowed to accept any gifts. You can't accept planning points like from Hilton, Marriott. If you book with them, you get all these points. You're not allowed to do that. You have to submit an RFP and get at least 3 bids to justify why you're going with a certain location. And then the contracting process can take forever because I am not the contracting agent. It has to go through procurement. And as a university, a state university, they have this disclaimer that the university cannot pay for goods or services not rendered. And so oftentimes hotels are like, hey, no, we can't sign to a clause that says that. So it's lots of back and forth to come to a common agreement on either a sliding scale or what works best for the university, the hotel, or whatever vendor you're working with, because it could be AV as well, or even balloon column vendor, something as small as that. So it's a lot. It's a long process. What have I've seen that work well is using hotels that we had contracts with in the past, and that works well. But at the same time, if we're traveling to a different state, a different area, we might not have worked with them in the past. So it's starting over from scratch and getting them into the vendor management system. And that process takes a while. And then the contract and then all of that. So
it's about to say, my assumption is you work with a lot of similar vendors over and over if you can, just because that procurement process, it sounds like, is quite lengthy.
we do, but at the same time, we like to always try to diversify the vendors that we go with, whether it's a hotel or if it's, like I said, AV vendors or decor. What we always recommend is if you have someone in mind that you're interested in, get them on board ASAP so that they're already in the system. If you know you're going to work with them in the future, get them in the system. Lots of hoteliers are already in the system across the country, but when it comes to like AV companies, to make sure they get paid on time, make sure that they're in the system as soon as possible.
That's like the not fun part of events. I feel like sometimes the back end, but it's the important part, right? Because you want people to get paid and be happy and all of that. So that does sound like there's more hoops, that you have to navigate in the university space.
And one more thing I'd like to add is that when it comes to vendors, depending on how the dollar amount, we don't necessarily have to go through procurement. Sometimes you could just use your P card, which is the credit card that you're given to pay for things. If it's over a certain threshold, then yes, it has to go through procurement. But if it's a balloon arch that's less than $1,000 or something like that, I could just use my P card, pay for it, and then submit the justification.
That makes sense. And that probably then helps you be a little bit more nimble with, last minute needs, right?
Agreed.
Just talking about collaborating with like faculty members and academic leaders, what are some of your pro tips from your experience working in higher education on like best practices for collaborating with them during your event planning process?
Best practices, in my opinion, would be when it comes to planning, even though you don't have everything outlined in advance, get it on the calendar. Already, like if you know you have a conference that's a year away, meet every 3 weeks. And then as you get closer, switch it to every 2 weeks. And then every week, just so that you can nail it down on their calendar and it's there standing. And if you need to cancel, you can cancel. I found that to work really well, given that their schedules always change. They're traveling, speaking at conferences, speaking during their time to speak when they're teaching. So that is something that I found to be extremely helpful. Another thing is if you know the venue or the particular date, the year that you want an event to happen, send the RFP out as soon as possible. Because a lot of times in higher education, we like to wait till the last minute. And when you send out an RFP last minute, you don't get that many good bids and you're kind of scrambling. So try to nail down either the time of the year, the date, general location in advance. I find that to be very helpful. And then also when it comes to speakers, tell your conference chairs, summit chairs, like, hey, if you have a speaker in mind, email them now. Tell them that the conference will be in this location, a general month and year, just so that they have it on their calendar until we can get things confirmed.
Those are some great tips for sure. And one of the things that I think is kind of a fun direction to go next is you've mentioned that this is a labor of love, this work. And I can see that because there's lots of nuances and things that you've described. So can you just describe how you feel like it can be a labor of love and maybe share a moment when you feel like all this hard work, all of these things, they really paid off?
So I can I can name off like so many different events where it's like, this finally paid off. I can name something early in my career that I really refer back to, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was so awesome. And then something more recently. So early in my career, I think it's like Wildlife Disease Association or something like that. Early in my career, I helped one of my colleagues with that conference, and they decided to do an auction. They had a silent auction portion and then a live auction portion. And I'm talking about this conference had like 800 attendees. It was huge, so many different like concurrent sessions. And so I was tasked with the auction portion, come up with how that's going to go, the way they done it in the past. It didn't work well, come up with a new way. And so I had to start from scratch basically on how I wanted to implement the live auction versus the silent auction. How would we take in the items? How would we, know what the items are, enough time so we can like make sure everyone checks out. And so I did all of that with my colleague. She was the main conference organizer for that event. And when I tell you that conference, they said that they've raised the most money they have ever raised. I think it was around like $12,000 for that specific conference between the live auction and the silent auction items. And the way that I organized and reworked that portion, they were extremely thankful because it was less chaotic. And so being pretty early in my career, and I believe I was pregnant at that time too, it was just like, oh my gosh, like that, it was awesome. Another one more recently was for a summit that just happened in February. So I started my position August 2024 and had to plan a summit that happened February 2025. And so in that short amount of time, trying to understand my role and get everything up and running. And so that summit, we exceeded attendance expectations based on the previous one by 300%. And then we exceeded sponsorship by, I believe, almost 300% as well. So it was just a really awesome time. And I'm just like, wow, this event grew from the previous year. And I also was awarded an award as well. So it's so much work leading up to it because I'm the only event planner for the Institute. So late nights trying to make sure I have all of the presentations in the appropriate folders, following up with people, making sure that, everything's set for the AV company, and I can easily tell them like, hey, this is what we're going to do. So it was like I said, a labor of love, lots of late nights and stressing, like, how am I going to get this done? And it was just executed beautifully.
All the warm fuzzies. That just sounds like, Beline, I feel like it's just, that's amazing, honestly. And one I think a lot of planners in different industries could relate to as well, of just, the late nights and all the attention to detail, I feel like is something I see across industries and across roles for folks who continue to love what they're doing. Just kind of thinking about, we've got some listeners who are not working at a university, but are maybe a corporate planner or a nonprofit planner, and they're interested in helping or being a part of a university event. Since you're on the inside there, what's one thing you would want those external planners to know up front?
So working with a university, like I've worked, like I said, in conference department, I've worked at the Career Center, and now within this Florida Semiconductor Institute. One thing I would say is be patient. Things move really slowly in higher education, unfortunately. So just be patient with us. Feel free to follow up, but at the same time, we might not have the answers right away. Another thing is if a university has like a procurement office and you're a small business and you want to get plugged in, a lot of times universities might have like a small business supplier network. I'd say look that up within your region or whatever large university is nearby so that you can get plugged in, because a lot of times the university will encourage us to use small businesses for vendors to get plugged in so that we're supporting our small businesses. So that's one thing that I would recommend.
That's awesome. We actually were pitching to support a local university, like a series of their events actually, and they were doing one that was like it was a traveling event. I think it was like maybe even a recruitment event. I don't remember. This was a while ago. But anyway, we ended up not getting it, and I've realized that there was a nuance to all of these university events and all the things that go along with it. So I'm taking notes. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back, and I'm gonna work on some of these things. We're gonna see if we can get it. But anyway, so that's super helpful for me to hear as an event planner, maybe a potential vendor. And then kind of shifting even a little more for someone who's listening to this, let's say they want to get more involved in planning events in the higher education space. What's some advice that you might have for them?
Advice that I may have is basically whatever experience you have, whether it's not within higher ed, if it's corporate or if it's independent planning, all of it relates to one another. Because at the same time, even though we're planning events in higher education, the core fundamentals can be transferred over from industry to industry. And it's oftentimes what you know. And those things will help you whether land the job or get hired as a vendor, because oftentimes we'll need help. Like it might just be one person as the sole event planner, and they might need to hire someone else to help take on whatever extra items that they need. Or like if it's a large conference, like a show caller to work with AV, because they can't be that person if they're running around doing everything else. So getting connected, like I said, with the small business affairs that a university might have would be a great step, and just networking in general.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine, especially you said you're a team of one. So how many hats you wear on an event day. So I hope you're able to have resources to bring in some hands. But I mean, again, talking about the labor of love, the different regulations, all the things that you have to handle in a university role compared to maybe external planners. What keeps you motivated, Beline? Like you've been in this line work, you've moved around a bit too, which I think is just so fascinating. But what keeps you motivated to keep working in university events?
So, what keeps me motivated is basically the mission. I am very passionate about education and equal access to everyone when it comes to education, and just knowing that I'm doing my part, whether it be small or big, having that as like my North Star is what keeps me going, what keeps me happy, what keeps me motivated. Whether it was when I was working in the conference department, the Career Center, helping students get plugged into internships, to full-time jobs, helping with the career fairs, because oftentimes students may go as freshmen and they're like, whoa, all of these expos, these different companies setting up booths, I'm intimidated. So just being behind the scenes to make sure all of that goes well. It makes me happy knowing that I'm doing my part in the greater good of working in higher education, supporting equal access to everyone. Like I said, whether it's small, big, just doing my part in that.
I think that's wonderful and a great perspective to have for sure. So thank you so much for sharing that. And just kind of one last tip. What do you hope listeners, if they could take away one thing from today's episode, whether they work in higher education or not, what's one kind of thought that you'd like to leave them with?
One thought. That's
Hard to summarize it all.
is
Yeah.
it is a hard one. I'll say, sometimes people will think of like higher education, like event planning in higher education can't be fun. It's all these rules, guidelines, they talk about the color of money. You can only pay food from this bucket if you have sponsorships, and pay speakers from that bucket. You can't, like certain things like that. But planning events can be fun. It's not just conferences and summits. We do mixers, we do tailgates, we do fundraising events, workshops, things for the community as well. So it's not just like boring to say, I don't want to say boring, but it's not just boring events. It's really cool, fun, interesting things. And granted, there's a lot of minutia and guidelines and strict things, but I just want people to think of like event planning in higher education. It can be fun and exciting.
Yeah, I think this is another job I might call kind of hidden in plain sight, because I don't think many listeners would think the engineering department or the Semiconductor Institute, has an event planner. But that's really cool that there's a lot of overlap and opportunity in the university space. Before we let you go, is there anything else you want to add? And can you share how listeners can find you?
Listeners can find me on LinkedIn. It's Beline Lafayette. I don't think there are any other Beline Lafayettes. So if you search that and LinkedIn, I'll show up. You can get connected, learn what a semiconductor is, and then see the different type of events that we plan. Like I said, it's not just summits and conferences. It's things that are cool. We have a STEM community day coming up. That's really cool for K through 12 students and their families, workshops and different things like that. So LinkedIn is the best way to get connected, and that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Beline, for being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We will hopefully see you on a future episode. I know there's several listeners who are also in the higher ed space, so just don't be surprised if some of them reach out to you.
Thanks. Oh, one more last thing. So I would say get connected with a meeting planning organization. So I recently joined MPI, Meeting Professionals International, and I literally just became a member last month. But it is so exciting just to hear other planners and what they go through, and also suppliers, just to hear the different complexities on both sides. And there's other professional organizations for different associations or different things. Just getting connected is one thing that I will say is very beneficial.
Both of us are big fans of MPI, so I'm glad you shouted them out. That's good to know. It's been valuable.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. And Mary, you have our bonus tip this week.
I do. Okay, so as you know, some of our bonus tips are unrelated to our episodes. This one is kind of unrelated, but still a good tip. If you are on the business side of events, I know not all of us are not, but if you are, Logan, this was actually a bonus tip that you've already given, but I'm taking it back to share again because it has been immensely helpful for me. So this is a reshare. Have Calendly or some calendar booking functionality on your website so that people can book direct. When I did this, Logan, this was your idea. I was like nervous because I was afraid I'd get like a bunch of spam bookings. But what I actually get is a ton of potential clients just going direct and booking their discovery call. And it is amazing when I see the email pop up. I'm like, it's just a pleasant little surprise all the time. And it really streamlines that process. So I haven't had any weirdos use that link yet. Let's cross our fingers. But it has been great for potential clients. And so that is my bonus tip for today. And thank you, Logan, for this past bonus tip.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad it's worked out. Yeah. Game changer for me compared to my contact form. So that brings us to the end of the episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can connect with us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. That might get you featured in a future episode. Who knows? Beline did it. So feel free to send us a connection, but just make sure you mention that you know of us from the podcast. And if you want more Better Events content, join our private community over on Substack. Thank you for those of you who have. It's really fun. We have a Slack channel and we get some bonus content for that group. And as always, we thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.